Okay, welcome back to some more naval action, and I thought we'd try a little experiment this time. I'm going to try and cover the toings and froings in the PvP arena on PvP1 Euro. I'm going to call this a letter to the king. One can imagine that this is a briefing coming home, explaining what's been going on in the new world and around the Caribbean. Now, before I get into it, just some disclaimers. I am not the leader of any great, well orchestrated naval admiral or any such thing like that. I personally have a limited involvement in the PvP. I was involved in the last week or so in a couple of port battles and a few screening forces. A lot of that's to do with the fact that a lot of the port timers are at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is a bit pesky. But I am very interested in where we go with MMOs, where we have a persistent landscape that's fought over. It's always very interesting to imagine how much of it is sort of planned and strategic initiatives, whereas how much of it is just the sort of Brownian motion of 1,000 players just lumping together and having a bit of a biff. So we'll see how this goes, and let's get on with the report. So this is a letter to the king, 29th of March, the year of our Lord 1800 and something or other. This is the map. Most of you will be familiar with this when you press M, and this is the map at pretty much the time of posting. So let's see what's been going on in the last week or so. So probably the biggest action has been down here in the Honduras, Panama area. The map's a little bit clipped on this. I'll sort that out for the next one. Where 2 to 3 weeks ago, the French really rolled up the British ports, and in the last 6 or 7 days, and particularly over the last weekend, a dozen French ports fell. In fact, at the time of doing this, I don't believe there's a single French port left between Truxillo and Benavista in Panama. And the French fleet in that area has been basically reduced to splinters and soggy croissants. And it's one of the interesting things with the way PvP works is that if you defend, which the French did, 3 or 4 ports and you get rolled, there's a certain amount of exhaustion that takes place, both in the player base itself and the demoralization of losing, but also third rates, which are the mainstay of any port battle. They're in finite supply. Most clans tend to sort of collect them during the week from a bit of AI farming and then go on a weekend expedition. Once you've defended and lost 3 or 4 ports, you can get rolled, and that's what happened to the French. I don't think they won a single defense. They had a couple of attacks that worked, and they still, this morning anyway, still held 1 shallow water port, but I know there was a fleet going for it, and I'm pretty sure it's going to fall. Now, what that has meant is very interesting. It's meant that the French have now been pushed back all the way over here, so they're pretty much trapped between Granada and Montserrat. They're wedged in now between the Dutch and the Swedes, so the Swedes to the north and south of their current bases, and if they want to get back at the Brits, well, they've probably got more than an hour's flag carry now, so unless the Dutch decide to open up a deep water port for them, it will be very hard, if not even impossible, for the French to retaliate down in the Honduras-Panama line of ports. And this is very interesting. It's very interesting now for the Dutch because they now have some new neighbours, the lovely British. And if the Dutch are seen to cooperate with the French, then clearly the British are going to respond to that. And it leaves the French in a pickle, which is where they belong after their insubordination. Where do they go from here? Like I say, it's probably more than an hour's flag carry to get themselves back into the areas they were at before, so that'll be very interesting to see where the French go. So probably the main action of the last week has been the significant crushing of the French fleet around this area. But there has been some other action. The Danes with suspiciously Russian accents in many cases, have made a couple of forays towards Jamaica. An obscure run on Wednesday or Thursday night where they just sent, with no flag, a big ass fleet and proceeded to get themselves involved in all sorts of lovely PvP just south of Port Morant. And then at the start of the long weekend there, they sent a fleet down to take Port Morant, but the winds were against them, and it took them the best part of 45 minutes to get the flag within striking distance of Port Morant. And the British defence, they lined up all of their big ships of the line and third rates right on the front doorstep of Port Morant and sent out a 25 fleet screening force. I was part of that, of fourth and fifth rates, and we engaged the flag carrier when they were about 10 minutes out. We pulled all the third of the line ships in, kept them all tagged and gave them a bit of a kiss and a cuddle. And the timer was up, and then, to be honest, it all melted away. I was rather hoping the third rates would get stuck into each other then, but I think they're a little bit too prized to be used in something that perhaps is going to really deliver less than a port. But however, there's been a lot of harrying in this neck of the woods by the Danes, pushing down towards Port Morant, and one gets the feeling that they've got eyes on Jamaica. But they also have to have eyes to the north of them, because the pirates, although they're meant to be a anarchic, chaotic rabble without any real organisation, they've probably been the second most active group over the last week. The pirates have been having a bit of a biff over here with the Danes, and they've snagged a port or two. They've eaten into a chunk of Florida and the Keys and the islands off Florida. And there's quite a bit of action, quite a bit of port capture going up here. The pirates also swept down and took a few of the islands around here, as well as still holding the majority of Cuba. So the Little Cayman and Georgetown fell early on in the week to the pirates, and then they started working up around here. And I have to say, any missioning north of Jamaica is kind of suicide unless you're doing it with buddies, because there's always pirate fleets nibbling at your heels. I was never a big fan of the battle timer when you went into a mission. It was always a bit boring just sitting there. Now it's anything but boring. You're sitting there waiting for the timer to tick over and just hoping that half a dozen other ships don't appear in the middle of your master and commander mission or whatever it is you're doing. So the pirates have been very active, and in classic pirate fashion, they've been just randomly biffing anybody. So they've been snotting the Americans up in this neck of the woods. These were British ports they took down here. I think it was the Danes that they were getting stuck into over here. So the pirates have been very active and probably very successful. They've probably gained about, I don't know exactly, maybe 6 to 8 ports. While the British were turning the French into little more than a soggy baguette, the Spanish snuck out of eastern Cuba and took a whole bunch of ports across the Yucatan off the Brits. Which is interesting now, because that opens up a new front to the north, and due to the fact, unless the Dutch get active at coming after the Brits, it does give the Brits a single focus now up here with where these pesky Spanish folks have come into the Yucatan. Also gives the Americans some new neighbours. So if I was going to predict a hot spot, I'd be predicting around the Yucatan and off the east coast of Jamaica, just based on the suspiciously Russian-sounding Danes that were playing around this area here. Of course, that leaves us wondering, well, what were those Americans up to? So it's very difficult to know what the Americans are up to. I haven't got much intelligence network over there on that seaboard. The best information we're getting is that the Americans are building a wall between PvP2 and PvP1 to stop everybody leaving PvP2, and they're going to make PvP1 pay for that wall. So that's the American news. I'd be interested if anyone's got any more information on what the new country is doing. So that's it really for the first episode. I'm more than happy in comments for any suggestions or tips or questions. I'll just jump in front of a couple of questions that I know you're going to ask. You're going to say, Jeheil, do you work for Pixar? Was it you who did the Game of Thrones intro just based on those graphics I've just seen? And no, those graphics are the output of the best tools of the early 19th century. I am limited on some of the action going at the far east and west of the map. I don't get out there much my way and much myself, and neither do my clan. So feel free to bung in comments if there's any major harassing or PvP going on in that neck of the woods. And we'll see how this goes. I want to maybe push this out once a week or once a fortnight, depending on the activity. And if it turns out to be rubbish and no one likes it, then as my grandma would say, if at first you don't succeed, bury all evidence you tried. So I'll just delete this and we'll never mention it again. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of A Letter to the King. If you did, please hit subscribe. Please comment. I'd be interested in what your thoughts are on sort of watching the PvP sprawl on the server. And I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.